A cooperative is an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. Cooperatives include non-profit community organizations and businesses that are owned and managed by the people who use their services or by the people who work there or by the people who live there. Hybrids such as worker cooperatives that are also consumer cooperatives or credit unions. Multi-stakeholder cooperatives such as those that bring together civil society and local actors to deliver community needs. And second and third-tier cooperatives whose members are other cooperatives. In short, a co-op can be defined as a jointly owned enterprise engaging in the production or distribution of goods or the supplying of services, operated by its members for their mutual benefit. Typically organized by consumers or farmers, cooperative businesses are typically more economically resilient than many other forms of enterprise, with twice the number of cooperatives surviving their first 5 years compared with other business ownership models. Cooperatives frequently have social goals which they aim to accomplish by investing a proportion of trading profits back into their communities. As an example of this, in 2013, retail cooperatives in the UK invested 6.9% of their pre-tax profits in the communities in which they trade as compared with 2.4% for other rival supermarkets. The International Cooperative Alliance was the first international association formed by the cooperative movement. It includes the World Council of Credit Unions. A second organization was formed later in Germany, the International Raiffeisen Union. In the United States, the National Cooperative Business Association serves as the sector's oldest national membership association. It is dedicated to ensuring that cooperative businesses have the same opportunities as other businesses operating in the country and that consumers have access to cooperatives in the marketplace. A U.S. National Cooperative Bank was formed in the 1970s. By 2004, a new association focused on worker co-ops was founded, the United States Federation of Worker Cooperatives. In 2012, the turnover of the largest 300 cooperatives in the world reached $2.2 trillion, which, if they were a country, would make them the 7th largest. Origins. Cooperation dates back as far as human beings have been organizing for mutual benefit. Tribes were organized as cooperative structures, allocating jobs and resources among each other, only trading with the external communities. In alpine environments, trade could only be maintained in organized cooperatives to achieve a useful condition of artificial roads such as Via Mala in 1472. Pre-industrial Europe is home to the first cooperatives from an industrial context. In 1761, the Fenwick Weavers' Society was formed in Fenwick, East Ayrshire, Scotland to sell discounted oatmeal to local workers. Its services expanded to include assistance with savings and loans, emigration and education. In 1810, Welsh social reformer Robert Owen, from Newtown in mid-Wales, and his partners purchased New Lanark Mill from Owen's father-in-law David Dale and proceeded to introduce better labour standards including discounted retail shops where profits were passed on to his employees. Owen left New Lanark to pursue other forms of cooperative organisation and develop co-op ideas through writing and lecture. Cooperative communities were set up in Glasgow, Indiana and Hampshire, although ultimately unsuccessful. In 1828, William King set up a newspaper, The Cooperator, to promote Owen's thinking, having already set up a cooperative store in Brighton. The Rochdale Society of Equitable Pioneers, founded in 1844, is usually considered the first successful cooperative enterprise, used as a model for modern co-ops, following the Rochdale principles. a group of 28 weavers and other artisans in Rochdale, England set up the society to open their own store selling food items they could not otherwise afford. Within 10 years there were over 1,000 cooperative societies in the United Kingdom. Other events such as the founding of a friendly society by the Tolpuddle martyrs in 1832 were key occasions in the creation of organised labour and consumer movements. Social economy. Cooperatives traditionally combine social benefit interests with capitalistic property right interests. Cooperatives achieve a mix of social and capital purposes by democratically governing distribution questions by and between equal controlling members. Democratic oversight of decisions to equitably distribute assets and other benefits means capital ownership is arranged in a way for social benefit inside the organization. External societal benefit is also encouraged by incorporating the operating principle of cooperation between cooperatives. In the final year of the 20th century, cooperatives banded together to establish a number of social enterprise agencies which have moved to adopt the multi-stakeholder cooperative model. In the years 1994 to 2009, the EU and its member nations gradually revised national accounting systems to make visible the increasing contribution of social economy organizations. Organizational and ideological roots. The roots of the cooperative movement can be traced to multiple influences and extend worldwide. In the Anglosphere, post-feudal forms of cooperation between workers and owners that are expressed today as profit-sharing and surplus-sharing arrangements existed as far back as 1795. The key ideological influence on the Anglosphere branch of the cooperative movement, however, was a rejection of the charity principles that underpinned welfare reforms when the British government radically revised its poor laws in 1834. As both state and church institutions began to routinely distinguish between the deserving and undeserving poor, a movement of friendly societies grew throughout the British Empire based on the principle of mutuality, committed to self-help in the welfare of working people. Friendly societies established forums through which one member, one vote was practiced in organization decision-making. The principles challenged the idea that a person should be an owner of property before being granted a political voice. Throughout the second half of the 19th century there has been a surge in the number of cooperative organizations, both in commercial practice and civil society, operating to advance democracy and universal suffrage as a political principle. Friendly societies and consumer cooperatives became the dominant form of organization amongst working people in Anglosphere industrial societies. Prior to the rise of trade unions and industrial factories, Weinbrenn reports that by the end of the 19th century, over 80% of British working-age men and 90% of Australian working-age men were members of one or more friendly society. From the mid-19th century, mutual organizations embraced these ideas in economic enterprises, firstly amongst tradespeople, and later in cooperative stores, educational institutes, financial institutions and industrial enterprises. The common thread is the principle that an enterprise or association should be owned and controlled by the people it serves, and share any surpluses on the basis of each member's cooperative contribution rather than the capacity to invest financial capital. The cooperative movement has been fueled globally by ideas of economic democracy. Economic democracy is a socio-economic philosophy that suggests an expansion of decision-making power from a small minority of corporate shareholders to a larger majority of public stakeholders. There are many different approaches to thinking about and building economic democracy. Anarchists are committed to libertarian socialism and have focused on local organization, including locally managed cooperatives, linked through confederations of unions, cooperatives and communities. Marxists, who as socialists have likewise held and worked for the goal of democratizing productive and reproductive relationships. often placed a greater strategic emphasis on confronting the larger scales of human organization, as they viewed the capitalist class to be politically, militarily and culturally mobilized for the purpose of maintaining an exploitable working class. They fought in the early 20th century to appropriate from the capitalist class the society's collective political capacity in the form of the state, either through democratic socialism, or through what came to be known as Leninism, though they regard the state as an unnecessarily oppressive institution. Marxists considered appropriating national and international scale capitalist institutions and resources to be an important first pillar in creating conditions favorable to solidaristic economies. With the declining influence of the USSR after the 1960s, socialist strategies pluralized, though economic democratizers have not as yet established a fundamental challenge to the hegemony of global neoliberal capitalism, meaning cooperatives as legal entities. A cooperative is a legal entity owned and democratically controlled by its members. Members often have a close association with the enterprise as producers or consumers of its products or services, or as its employees. There are specific forms of incorporation for cooperatives in some countries, e.g., Finland, Sweden, and Australia. Cooperatives may take the form of companies limited by shares or by guarantee, partnerships or unincorporated associations. In the UK they may also use the industrial and provident society structure. In the USA, cooperatives are often organized as non-capital stock corporations under state-specific cooperative laws. However, they may also be unincorporated associations or business corporations such as limited liability companies or partnerships. Such forms are useful when the members want to allow some members to have a greater share of the control, or some investors to have a return on their capital that exceeds fixed interest, neither of which may be allowed under local laws for cooperatives. Cooperatives often share their earnings with the membership as dividends, which are divided among the members according to their participation in the enterprise, such as patronage, instead of according to the value of their capital shareholdings. Identity cooperatives are typically based on the cooperative values of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy and equality, equity and solidarity, and the 7 cooperative principles: voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, economic participation by members, autonomy and independence, education, training and information, cooperation among cooperatives, concern for community. Cooperatives are dedicated to the values of openness, social responsibility and caring for others. Such legal entities have a range of social characteristics. Membership is open, meaning that anyone who satisfies certain non-discriminatory conditions may join. Economic benefits are distributed proportionally to each member's level of participation in the cooperative, for instance, by a dividend on sales or purchases, rather than according to capital invested. Cooperatives may be classified as either worker, consumer, producer, purchasing or housing cooperatives. They are distinguished from other forms of incorporation in that profit-making or economic stability are balanced by the interests of the community. Co-ops can sometimes be identified on the Internet through the use of the coop suffix of Internet addresses. Organizations using coop domain names must adhere to the basic co-op values. The United Nations has declared 2012 to be the International Year of Cooperatives' Economic Stability. Capital and the Debt Trap reports that cooperatives tend to have a longer life than other types of enterprise, and thus a higher level of entrepreneurial sustainability. A 2013 report published by the UK Office for National Statistics showed that in the UK the rate of survival of cooperatives after 5 years was 80% compared with only 41% for all other enterprises. A further study found that after 10 years 44% of cooperatives were still in operation, compared with only 20% for all enterprises. This resilience has been attributed to how cooperatives share risks and rewards between members. how they harness the ideas of many, and how members have a tangible ownership stake in the business. Additionally, cooperative banks build up counter-cyclical buffers that function well in case of a crisis, and are less likely to lead members and clients towards a debt trap. This is explained by their more democratic governance that reduces perverse incentives and subsequent contributions to economic bubbles.